The glass shattered before I understood what was happening. My mother's hands were already reaching for the second frame, yanking it off the wall with enough force to send it crashing into the trash can she'd placed right beside the dining table. My face stared up at me from behind cracked glass, surrounded by 33 relatives who had suddenly stopped chewing. The ringing in my ears made her voice sound distant, like she was shouting from the end of a long tunnel. This one has been leeching off this family for years. Every dollar we ever spent on her was wasted. My fingernails dug into the underside of my thighs hard enough to leave marks, not because I was trying to stay calm, but because my body had decided on its own that if I moved even slightly, I would scream. The taste of the pot roast I'd just swallowed turned metallic in my mouth. My father didn't tell her to stop. He looked directly at me and said loud enough for every cousin, aunt, and uncle to hear that I owed them every cent they'd ever spent raising me, that I was nothing but a bad investment. My sister Brianna shoved back her chair and gestured toward the door like she was escorting a shoplifter out of a department store. My name is Megan. I'm 27 and I work in UX design. This is the story of how I stopped being my family's credit line and started being their worst financial nightmare. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I picked up my bag, walked out of the house they'd just erased me from, and called a ride back to my apartment. They thought that was the end of it. They had no idea I'd been tracking what they'd done to my name and my credit for months. And that dinner was the final confirmation I needed to turn their perfect family portrait into the kind of legal destruction they never saw coming. When I got back to my apartment, my hands weren't shaking from what they'd said. They were shaking from what they'd just confirmed. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a line item, a debt they thought they owned the receipt for. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to my laptop. No texts, no social media posts. I opened a blank document and typed one sentence in all caps at the top. This is not about hurt feelings. This is about what they did to my name. Here's what you need to understand about my family. My mom, Patricia, is a senior loan officer at a credit union outside Austin. The kind of woman who reminds you she understands money every time you try to make a decision without her. My dad, Ronald, co-owns a heating and air company he built from nothing, and he never lets anyone forget how much it cost to raise me. My older sister, Brianna, is a guidance counselor. All soft smiles and inspirational Facebook quotes. We're the Morrows. Matching Christmas sweaters, staged photos at every barbecue, perfect on paper. Behind closed doors, it was different. When I chose UX design instead of accounting or nursing, Patricia called it a phase. Ronald would joke in front of everyone that I was the artistic one, which in his voice meant the irresponsible one. Every choice I made that didn't match their script became a debt they thought I owed. When I was 19, Patricia insisted I open a joint account with her, just to help manage your bills so you don't mess up your credit. I was exhausted, so I signed whatever she put in front of me. She set up online banking, saved all the passwords, and told me not to change them. Years later, after I'd moved to Austin and gotten my own place, she was still the one with my social security number memorized. My mail still went to their house because it's safer. I thought it was just controlling. I didn't think it was criminal until the letters started arriving. A few months before that dinner, I got a notice from a bank I'd never heard of thanking me for applying for a personal loan. I assumed it was junk mail and threw it away. Then another envelope came about a new line of credit. My credit score app pinged me with a drop that didn't make sense. I was paying my card on time. My student loans were current. That night, I didn't let it slide. I pulled up annual credit report and requested files from every bureau. While the PDFs downloaded, I made myself breathe slowly, letting the anger burn off just enough that I wouldn't make sloppy mistakes. When the reports opened, it felt like someone had flipped on fluorescent lights in a room I'd only ever seen by candlelight. There were accounts I'd never opened, in cities I'd never lived in, all tied to my name and my parents' address. Small personal loans, a store card, a line of credit that had been maxed out and rolled into a consolidation loan. The dates lined up perfectly with years I'd been too busy to read every piece of mail they forwarded. The mailing address on almost every account was my parents' home. The phone number on several was Patricia's. I stared at the screen, waiting for another explanation to appear. It didn't. I created a new folder and started dragging everything in. Credit reports, screenshots of alerts, Photos of old envelopes I'd thought were spam. I wrote down account numbers by hand, circling everyone that listed their address instead of mine. Then I went to identitytheft.gov and followed every step. I filed an official report describing how someone with access to my personal information had opened lines of credit without my consent and routed them through an address I no longer lived at. I answered every form like I was testifying before a jury. After that, I placed fraud alerts with each bureau and initiated a freeze, locking down my file so no one could open anything new without layers of verification. Only then did I open my design software. I laid out a clean infographic with bold numbers and short lines of text about how identity theft can start inside your own family. No names, no locations, just patterns and warning signs, with one quiet line at the bottom. This happened to me. They thought keeping everything in the dark would protect them. I was done leaving anything in the dark. The next morning, my phone looked like it had been in a car accident. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. My dad started around 5 a.m., call after call. Brianna joined by 7 a.m., 20 missed calls and messages about how I'd embarrassed everyone. By 10 a.m., Patricia was texting paragraphs that started with, "We need to talk calmly," and ended with, "Please pick up just once." I didn't open anything. I just photographed the notifications one by one and saved them to the same folder as the credit reports. Receipts, patterns, proof that they only reached for me when they needed something or when they realized they'd pushed too far. I uploaded the infographic to an anonymous account on a personal finance subreddit. Simple title: My family used my identity for years. Here's what I wish I'd noticed sooner. Then I posted a toned-down version on LinkedIn, framed as educational content about red flags. Within hours, people were commenting, asking questions, sharing their own stories of parents and spouses, opening accounts behind their backs. It was comforting and horrifying to realize how common this was. One DM stood out, a generic username, but something in the message felt familiar. They thanked me for posting, said the layout was clear, then added, "Some of this sounds exactly like what my sister has been doing to the family." A minute later, another message. "Megan, is this you?" My skin prickled. Not many people know I do both UX and side design work, and even fewer would recognize my style from a single infographic. It was Denise, Patricia's older sister, the accountant who always seemed slightly outside the family photos, like she'd been cropped in at the last minute. We switched to a private call. I walked onto my balcony while morning traffic hummed below. Denise's voice sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. She said a couple years back, Patricia had helped her restructure some debt after a rough patch with clients. She'd signed a stack of documents because Patricia told her it was just consolidating credit cards into one payment. Recently, letters had started coming about a loan Denise swore she'd never taken. When she asked Patricia, my mother brushed it off as a clerical error. As Denise talked, I typed every detail into a new file: bank names, dates, amounts, the exact words Patricia had used. She stopped and asked quietly, "Megan, did she do this to you too?" I told her about my credit reports, the accounts I never opened, my name tied to their address years after I moved out. I heard her breathing on the other end, the slow inhale of someone realizing a suspicion they've had for a long time was finally being confirmed. "I thought I owed her for helping," Denise admitted. "Now it feels like I paid with interest I never agreed to." She agreed to scan and email every piece of paperwork she could find. When we hung up, I had a clear picture forming. This wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. Brianna texted me 2 days later, like nothing catastrophic had happened. "Can we meet for coffee to talk like adults?" Then a follow-up. "It's about mom and money. Please." That second sentence did what 33 relatives yelling couldn't. It made me curious. We met at a cafe near my office, the kind with plants hanging from the ceiling. Brianna was already there, eyes shadowed like she hadn't slept since the dinner. She apologized for how things went, not for what she did. She blamed stress, the economy, pressure on our parents. I let her talk until she ran out of excuses. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of my credit reports with every fraudulent account highlighted. Her face went pale when she saw our parents' address next to my name over and over. She tried spinning it. Mom was just helping. She knows how to get better rates. I asked when exactly trust started meaning signing someone else's name on a loan. That shut her up. I showed her Denise's email where Patricia called a collection notice just a mix-up and told her to ignore it. Then I asked Brianna straight out if Patricia had ever used her information. She hesitated just long enough to answer without saying a word. There'd been times Patricia handled things for her too. A consolidation, a refinance Patricia called a harmless cosign. Brianna had signed where Patricia pointed because that was easier than reading every line. The more she talked, the more her answers matched accounts tied to my file and Denise's letters. Less like separate favors, more like a system. When I mentioned Grandma Evelyn, something flickered across Brianna's face. Patricia had handled everything when Evelyn sold her house and moved into assisted living. Every meeting, every call. She'd brought a neat little check to the moving party and said the rest went to fees and taxes. I typed while Brianna talked, building a timeline. Year 1, I start college and open a joint account with Patricia. Year 2, Denise hits a rough patch. Patricia steps in. Year 3, Grandma sells her house. Year 4, Ronald's company suddenly has a new work truck and remodeled office. When I told Brianna I'd filed with the FTC and that Patricia's own credit union would have to investigate, she stopped spinning. She asked what I planned to do next. I told her I was talking to an attorney, not to sue for fun, but to protect myself before their mess destroyed my financial future. If that meant dragging the whole rotten structure into the light, so be it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. One blurry photo. Ronald grinning next to a new company truck, beer in hand. Caption: "Funny how fast that upgrade showed up after Grandma sold her house, huh?" From my uncle on Ronald's side. He'd gotten my number from a cousin months earlier when family drama first started leaking out, and Brianna had apparently mentioned we were meeting that day. I showed Brianna. The last piece of denial slipped from her face. A week later, Patricia showed up at my office unannounced. "There's a woman here asking for you," the receptionist slacked me. "Says she's your mother. She looks intense." I walked out to the lobby. There she was in her best work blazer, clutching a leather folder like she was about to sell someone a mortgage. "Megan," she said, standing up with her church smile. "Can we talk?" I glanced at the lobby cameras and told her we could talk right there. No closed doors. She didn't like that, but she sat anyway. She started with the kind of apology you give when you're worried about appearances. Things got heated. Everyone was emotional. "It's been hard on your father and me." Then she showed her real reason for being there. "I saw something online," she said, voice dropping. "Some infographic about family identity theft. People are talking. I need to know what you've been saying about us." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Did I hurt you?" Just, "What are you telling people that could make my life harder?" I told her I'd posted an educational graphic about what happens when someone abuses access to another person's financial information. No names, no locations. But I'd also filed an official identity theft report and frozen my credit. Banks and regulators would start asking questions about what she'd done with my Social Security number. The color drained from her face. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my career, to this family?" I told her I had a very clear idea what she'd done to my credit, to Denise's, probably to Grandma's. I slid a printed summary across the coffee table. Dates, lenders, amounts, the same home address appearing over and over. "You don't understand how this works," she said, trying to regain control. "I know people at these places. I structured loans to look good on paper. I did this to help you build credit, to help Denise, to help Mom. No one was complaining until you decided to make a spectacle." I reminded her that helping someone usually involves telling them what you're signing them up for. I mentioned the email where she called Denise's collection notice a clerical error. Her eyes flashed. For a moment, I thought she might yell. Instead, she leaned forward and lowered her voice, which was somehow worse. "You are my daughter. We don't take each other to court. We don't drag family business in front of strangers. You want your credit fixed? I'll fix it. I'll make some calls. But you need to stop whatever you've started. Take down your posts. Tell whoever you've talked to it was a misunderstanding." Behind her, my boss Derek had stepped out of a meeting room and was pretending to check his phone. I looked my mother in the eye. No, I wasn't deleting anything. I I wasn't calling this a misunderstanding. I wasn't helping her keep it buried because she was afraid for her job title. She stood fast enough to knock the folder against the table. "You're making a mistake. When this comes back on you, don't come running to me." She walked out without looking at Derek, heels clicking like a metronome. He walked over afterward and asked if I was okay. I gave him the short version, just enough to explain there might be uncomfortable calls coming to the office. Instead of backing away, he offered to loop in, company legal if Patricia tried showing up again. That small gesture. Someone believing me on the first pass. It felt like oxygen. The ripples kept spreading. Denise sent scans of everything. Loan documents with suspicious signatures, payoff statements that didn't match, emails where Patricia told her to ignore the numbers. My attorney forwarded some of it to Patricia's credit union. They were already looking into her because of my identity theft report. Now they had more than red flags. They had a pattern. A state investigator called to ask follow-up questions. Nothing dramatic, just a calm voice walking through dates and accounts, confirming I hadn't authorized any of this. Every time I answered no, something heavy shifted a little more in my favor. At night, when anger kept me awake, I built a simple website explaining how financial abuse and identity theft happen inside families, links to government resources, my story broken into anonymized case studies. No names. The facts were ugly enough on their own. Traffic ticked up as people shared it in forums and group chats. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years emailed asking if she should pull her own credit reports. I told her yes. It took months for everything to catch up with them. Not a dramatic movie scene. Slower. Like a fuse burning under the floorboards. First, the formal letter from Patricia's credit union saying they were reviewing multiple loan files connected to her and might reach out to me for verification. A week later, state regulators requested permission to use my complaint in a broader investigation. I signed every form. I wanted every flashlight possible pointed at what they'd been doing. Denise went in for her interview first. 2 compliance officers and a lawyer walked her through every favor Patricia had done in the past 5 years. They showed her documents with signatures that didn't look like hers and asked if she'd given Patricia permission to sign for her. Number. Had she received the full amounts those loans said she had? Number. Grandma Evelyn's part came next. Too frail for long meetings, so her lawyer arranged a deposition at the care facility. She cried when she saw how much money had gone through Patricia's hands when her house sold. Proceeds she'd never seen. Fees no one explained. Somewhere in the middle, Ronald tried damage control. He called me with a speech about outsiders trying to tear the family apart, investigators who didn't understand how families help each other off the books. I told him forging signatures and rerouting loan proceeds wasn't helping. He asked if I could just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Number. He hung up on me. The official fallout started with Patricia's job. The credit union put her on leave, their polite way of saying, "Don't come back while we figure out how deep this goes." Co-workers she'd known for 20 years suddenly audited loans she'd processed. A lot had familiar last names. Then came the civil case. Denise and Grandma Evelyn's lawyer filed suit against both my parents, arguing they'd benefited from money obtained through fraud. My name was in the filings too, a victim of identity theft. My attorney asked if I wanted to be there for the first hearing. I said no. I didn't need to watch Patricia pretend she didn't recognize her own handwriting. Brianna went. She texted me afterward saying she'd never seen Mom look so small. Their defense was what I expected. Family arrangements. Verbal promises, helping relatives through tough times. But every time they tried to frame it as accidents, there were numbers that didn't match, signatures that looked wrong, timelines too convenient. Money flowed in right when the business needed a boost, right when they wanted a new truck or house renovations, right after another relative signed something they didn't understand. The investigators didn't care about holiday photos or church attendance. They cared about documentation. The way Patricia's login appeared on loan files tied to relatives, notes in the system mentioning strong relationship with borrower, while those same borrowers sat across from them saying, "I didn't agree to any of this." The credit union fired Patricia for violating multiple internal policies and reported her to the state. Her license was permanently revoked. All those years of bragging about understanding money ended with her escorted out of a building she'd treated like her second home. On the civil side, my parents settled before it got worse. They agreed to repay what should have gone to Denise and Grandma, plus damages. Every loan opened in my name was unwound and removed. They settled not because they found a conscience, but because their lawyer explained fighting would open them up to criminal charges. The district attorney's office reviewed the case, but declined to file charges, citing the civil settlement and full restitution as sufficient resolution. They didn't have the cash to cover it, so they did what people like them swore they'd never have to do. They sold the house in the suburbs, the one with the wall of family photos that no longer included me. They sold the truck Ronald loved posing with. They sold a chunk of his company, bringing in a partner who made clear he was there to fix the mess, not protect anyone's pride. Some relatives were furious with me at first, convinced I'd overreacted. Those same relatives went quiet when letters arrived at their doors, encouraging them to check their own accounts. A few reached out privately to thank me. They'd never say it out loud at a reunion. The last time Ronald called, it was late. His voice was rough. He said I'd destroyed everything. The family was broke. Patricia might never work in her field again. People at church were whispering. I listened until he ran out of words. Then I told him the only thing that felt true. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped covering for what you've been doing for years. The hole you're standing in is one you dug yourselves. I finally stepped out of it. He went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. I never thought it would go this far. I told him it had gone this far the first time Patricia signed someone else's name on a loan. The only difference now was someone finally turned on the lights. More months passed. My parents moved from the big suburban house into a cramped rental on the edge of town, the kind of place you drive past without seeing. The yard Ronald used to obsess over was gone. The wall of framed photos had been boxed up. Patricia tried keeping up appearances, wearing the same blazer to interviews, but terminated after internal investigation, doesn't look great on a background check for financial jobs. She picked up part-time work wherever she could. Ronald kept a share of the company, but it wasn't really his anymore. The new partner came in with spreadsheets, not handshakes. Ronald hated answering to someone, hated having to justify every expense, hated people whispering about why he needed to sell off assets. For the first time in my life, the consequences landed on them instead of on the people they leaned on. Brianna transferred to a different school district after rumors about our parents spread. She sent me a long text saying she was angry and embarrassed and tired of feeling like she had to choose between being loyal and being honest. I told her I didn't need her to pick a side. I just needed her to stop pretending what happened was normal. We're not suddenly best friends, but there's less static and more quiet honesty. Denise and I talk more now than we ever did growing up. She sends pictures of her dog and updates about Grandma Evelyn, who's doing physical therapy and managing her own money for the first time. Grandma wrote me a shaky letter thanking me for not letting them make you small. She said she wished she'd spoken up sooner in her own life. I keep that letter in the same folder as all the ugly documents, a reminder that not everything from this was destruction. Some of it was correction. My life didn't turn into a montage. I still pay rent, still answer to a boss, still fight my own anxiety some nights. But my credit reports are clean. The fraudulent accounts are gone. The freeze stays in place, this time by my choice. I got a raise at work not because of what happened with my family, but because I showed up and refused to let their chaos drown me. The website I built started getting more traffic than I expected. People email me to say my case study helped them stop a parent from opening a loan in their name, or gave them the language to talk to a spouse about money. I wish I could tell you there was a neat ending where my parents apologized, meant it, and we all had some awkward but healing holiday dinner. That's not what happened. They're still angry. They still talk about me like I burned the house down instead of pointing out it was full of leaking gas. Maybe that will never change. What changed is me. I don't measure my worth in how much approval I can squeeze from people who only see me as collateral. I don't hand over my passwords, my signature, or my peace of mind just because someone shares my last name. If there's any lesson in this, it's that love and loyalty don't mean letting people use you as an asset for their bad decisions. You can care about your family and still protect yourself from them. You can be hurt and still choose to walk through the front door of the law instead of sneaking around in the dark. And if you have even the smallest feeling that something about your finances doesn't add up, you're not paranoid for checking. Pull your reports, ask hard questions, write things down. The people who really love you will want the truth as much as you do. The ones who don't might call it betrayal when you turn on the lights. But sometimes turning on the lights is the only way to see who's actually standing beside you and who's just been using your shadow. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.